Welcome, Duelysts! Today's video is far and away different than the usual content, and it marks a momentous occasion. That's right, today I'm doing my first ever tutorial! Woo! What we're gonna do is take a look at a faction. Today's is Lyonar. We're gonna look at their keywords, things that they like to do, and what some of their strengths and weaknesses are. I was originally going to just do the starter decks, but the Lyonar starter doesn't actually have any of the cool stuff that I want to show you, so this series is basically just gonna be primers. If I can figure out something cool to do, then I'll make something for the starter decks. All of this is so that I can provide you with some basic info to get you started and to help you choose what faction is right for you. I also think this will be a great learning experience for me, and I'm really excited to be doing it, so let's get started. First off, we need to take a look at Lyonar's core keyword, zeal. If a unit has zeal, it gets a bonus whenever it's in a space near your general. Duelyst defines near as any space directly adjacent, so any of these cute little yellow squares here. Bonuses can be pretty much anything. I think the most common are simple things like attack or health, but Suntide Maiden has a really awesome zeal ability. At the end of your turn, if she's standing next to your general, she gets restored to full health. We'll talk a bit more about the cool stuff that you can do with her later. For now, we should move on to another mechanic that is very important to the Lyonar faction and that they really love to use. I'm talking about Provoke. If you've played a few games, you've likely seen this dastardly little keyword in action, but you may not have really understood what it was or how you can use it in your own decks to some pretty great effect. For those of you joining us from Hearthstone, Provoke is basically Duelyst's form of the taunt mechanic, but here it goes a bit further. Any units standing near an enemy unit with the Provoke ability are unable to move or even attack any other units until the one provoking them is either removed from the board by getting killed or bounced, or moved to a space that isn't near them. The reason Lyonar digs this mechanic so much is that it allows an extra level of board control. Not only do you put a unit on the board and gain presence, but it can be used to seriously gain tempo by causing your opponent to use hard removal or run units into it. If they don't have any removal, then they're just stuck in place for at least one more turn. Whether or not you choose to attack with your Provoke minions is really entirely up to you. I find that it depends on the unit's stats. As an example, if I'm using this 1/4 neutral minion that's got Provoke, I'll usually just leave it alone and not attack with it. This is because I want my enemy to make the decision on how it stops being a problem for them. It'll usually take a general 2 hits to smack it to death, which means 2 turns if you're lucky. Usually though, they're gonna have something up their sleeve. But like I said, they're using their resources to handle the problem, instead of me just handling it for them. At the end of the day, Provoke is a great addition to almost any Lyonar deck because it lets you do what Lyonar loves: beat face. Now let's talk about their units as a whole. If you take a look at them, you'll notice that they're generally pretty beefy. They've got a bunch of health and usually a lower attack. There's one unit with more attack than health, and 2 units that have equal attack and health. At least, you know, at the time of this video's production, blah blah blah. Lyonar's units are statted like this because it's what allows them to get up close and actually have a chance to show off their fists. They've got great survivability in combat, and combined with various spells at Lyonar's disposal, can really become a force to be reckoned with. Speaking of spells, I'm going to show you what's probably Lyonar's strongest spell. Maybe not the best, but if used right, it can be extremely devastating. Now, I just want you to look at it for a bit. See if you can figure out why this is such a great card. This is a card that gives Lyonar some major threat on the board. You can put this onto a unit in the middle of your enemy, and it says, if you don't kill this guy, you're gonna have a very, very bad day on my next turn. It's got a low cost as well, so it's not too much of a detriment if your enemy uses hard removal on whatever you place it on. Sure, you come out on the short end as far as card advantage goes, but you can also use it as a distraction from whatever other threats you have. It can make your opponent have to make some very tough decisions, and if they make the wrong one, it can make them take a lot of damage. One of my favorite cards in Lyonar just so happens to also get absolutely ridiculous with Divine Blessing, and that's Ironcliff Guardian. This big boy has airdrop, which means you can summon him anywhere on the battlefield. On top of that, he's got Provoke, which we learned about earlier. So you drop him in the middle of your enemy's units, or on the other side of a wall that he's put up, or just right next to the enemy general, and then you wait and see what happens. Hold off on that Divine Blessing in your hand until you see that creature to survive. Then you drop it on the Guardian and you smack the enemy general or a creature for 13. There is a threat to this plan though. There are creatures and cards that dispel units or tiles, including whatever unit is in the tile. For Hearthstone players, dispel is silence. For everyone else, when you dispel a unit, you remove all card abilities and enchantments on that unit. You can't undo a dispel by using another dispel. The rest of Lyonar's spells are a mixed bag of minor buffs, removal, and healing. The best bet with these is honestly to play around with combinations of them to figure out what your deck is weak against and to find the tech that you need to toss in so that your bases are covered. There are a few great cards that I'd like to point out though. Sundrop Elixir is a 1-drop that heals any minion or general for 5. That's nuts! It's cheap and can really turn the tide if timed right. True Strike is 1 mana to deal 2 damage. In the early game, this can be used to really establish board position by sniping your enemy's cheap units, and in late game, it can be used to finish off the bigger units. Sunbloom dispels a 2x2 area on the battlefield. This means 4 squares and whatever units are in them. Yeah, it can get your own units, that just means you need to be careful. The rest of the spells should be experimented with as they all have their place, and going into each of them would take up too much time for this video. The biggest weaknesses that the Lyonar faction has are all related to playing catch-up. Apart from your airdrop units, it'll be difficult for you to catch up to your opponent when they're on the run. You don't have many ranged units in faction, which is why getting juked can be so problematic. To make this less of an issue, you should utilize Provoke. I feel like this bit of advice really applies to all factions though, because Provoke is amazing. While your spells are really useful, they often require your units to be alive for a turn before they can have any effect. This is really just the nature of your spells, so you need to be careful and plan ahead. Try to use various threats to distract your opponent from what you're really trying to do. Lastly, it can be very difficult for Lyonar to take control of the board away from their enemies. They have 3 cards that can be used to clear the board, but they all have drawbacks or stipulations. Tempest is strong, dealing 3 damage to all generals and units in play. This means it'll get your enemies, but it'll also get you. 3 is a decent amount of damage too. The best way to play this is to probably play it in a way that leaves you ahead on the board and then do any cleanup that you can. You want to save any units and play them after all of your damage and cleanup goes down. Decimate destroys any units not near a general. Once again, this includes your own units. I can see situations where this could be useful with you saving a couple of your own units. But for the most part, this is just a win more card. You can play it, but it's not going to change things much and would really just be a waste in any situation that'd leave you ahead in, because you're already ahead. Holy Immolation is probably the coolest of the 3, at least from a flavor standpoint. Heal a friendly minion for 4, then deal 4 damage to all of those around it. I can see some really fun and silly tactics coming from it, like dropping an airdrop minion into the middle of your opponent's units and then using this on it to get a huge amount of damage in. While they're not as in-your-face as some factions, Lyonar is able to use buffs and Provoke to control the battlefield and beat face in a very precise manner. They like to manage the flow of the field, and they rely on beefy units to make sure things go their way. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that what I've gone on about is able to help you learn more about Duelyst and Lyonar's strengths and weaknesses. Just keep in mind that these are general basics, and while they certainly ring true across the broad spectrum, you can without a doubt use neutral minions and various spells to experiment and come up with many variations on tactics and ways to play this and any other factions. If you did enjoy or if you learned something, then I hope you'll drop a like and subscribe for more content like this and other things I do, and share this video with anyone you know that wants to learn Duelyst. Feel free to follow me on Twitter and shoot me a message there, or to leave a comment down below with anything you learned from this video or anything that you would like to see me do in the future. Thanks for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye!